Well, hi, and welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven, and our guest today is Adam Lawrence. He is managing partner of his company, Process Improvement Partners. He has, like me, a BS in industrial engineering. So we have that and a lot in common professionally. His degree is from Virginia Tech. And Adam is author of the new book titled The Wheel of Sustainability: Engaging and Empowering Teams to Ensure Their Results Live On. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us and being a guest today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm happy that we can talk about the book and your work and all sorts of things. But let's jump right in. Adam, what is your favorite mistake?
Okay, didn't have to think very hard about this one, Mark. It came about 22 years ago. So, as you said, I'm an industrial engineer out of Virginia Tech, and I worked for a global ceiling tile company for many years. And early in that career, I used to go visit our manufacturing facilities and help team solve problems or improve the performance of their fabrication lines. In 1998, I went to Macon, Georgia. I was invited, at least I think I was, to Macon, Georgia, right? And I had spent time on the line maybe a month or so before that, identifying opportunities, meeting with the folks that worked on the line, and just basically spending 2 days to get to know where the issues were. And either I convinced management or my bosses convinced management to bring Adam back and spend a week doing what we called rapid improvement events. We didn't know the words Kaizen at the time. So basically, I was given a team of 6 operators and mechanics, a couple of supervisors, and myself. And the goal was to just improve the performance and safety of the line. So I had a bit of a process I used. So I brought the team in. We had a meeting room. Everything was set up on a Monday morning. And the first thing I noticed was it was just myself and the team. Nobody from management, no kickoff, no real process except for what I was going to do. So, of course, I was being stared at by these folks that essentially had never had the opportunity to make things better in their factory because in those days, that was management and engineering's issue. So I'm the guy. Who's this guy they just brought from corporate? We're going to try to fix our line. So, of course, they didn't really believe that was possible, but there was nobody telling us what we could or couldn't do. So we did a little bit of introduction, went started out at the line and started identifying things that we could improve. Well, these guys really got into it. And first day flew. We probably worked 10 to 12 hours and things were already getting better. I'd say about 4:30, 5:30, somewhere around then, it was time to stop. And nobody from management, including the guy that was the business unit manager of the operation, had come to see what we were doing. Yet we were making changes, improving things, talking to people. People were really getting into it. Safety was getting better. We were shutting the line down, trialing all sorts of different things. And I thought, well, somebody must be interested, but it didn't seem like they were. So eventually the team went home and I said, well, maybe I can do something about this. So I walk over to the business unit manager's office. Let's just call him Carl for the sake of argument, because that's not his real name. This actually is in the book because it's just an example of something that it was such an oopsie that I learned from it. So I started to tell Carl, he happened to be in his office and he looked up and waved and started telling him what a great job his folks were doing. And I knew from my prior visits to Macon that the operators and mechanics really weren't well thought of. They were thought of more as, lever pullers and button pushers and grabbers of material, but their creativity and their thought wasn't always highly respected. So I said, well, I can do something about it. I just spent a day with these folks and they were awesome. So I start to describe it to Carl, and He's relatively interested, but you can tell he had other things that were more important to him. So I invited him. I said, hey, I know you didn't have an opportunity today, but how about tomorrow? Come on out to the line because your folks are doing such a great job. And I know they'd really appreciate you being there with them and letting them know how much you appreciate them. So he said, well, I'm tied up in all day meetings and, if I can, I'll make some time for it. And he kind of waved me out of his office. So I walked away a little dejectedly. And, but, we were making progress. It was just day one. Let's see what happens day two. Let's see if I influenced his behavior at all. So day two, improvements happen faster and more furious, right? Because the team now believes they can do what they want to do and they're seeing improvements. And we were having fun and we were welding things in place so people couldn't move it, and things that this one or that one had always wanted to do, they were now doing. And now they wanted to work for 12 hours because the more they could do, the less management could screw it up. And that was their words. And I was like, okay, whatever floats your boat, I'm good. And we started to get visitation, but from crew members and mechanics. So still nobody from management. So the day was very, very long, but about 4:30, I kind of stepped away to see if I could go find Carl. Because now we're on Tuesday. Nobody, not the plant manager, not an engineer, nobody's come to see us. And I just can't believe it. Well, I find out, I go to Carl's office. Carl's gone for the day. So he had this all day meeting, but apparently he left early to do something that was more important. It either was a high school baseball game or cut the lawn or something of higher priority. But whatever it was, all I know was I think it was hard to hide how upset and frustrated I was as I walked out. You know, so I said, all right, I could do better than this. I got to be able to do better than this. How about I don't wait until the end of the next day to try to get this guy to come out, right? So it seems like a good plan. I'm in the hotel and I'm just getting them all excited about it. I'm going to get them to visit. Yeah, that's a great idea in your head, but when it happens, it doesn't really work out that way. So day three, we're rolling and the team's just killing it. They're just, I mean, you can actually see more ceiling tiles come down the line per hour than they've ever seen. So that's pretty cool. So we finally take a break. It might have been 9:30 or 10 o'clock. All right, I'm ready. I'm going to go visit Carl again. Now I'm going to convince. Now I wasn't convincing before, but I'm going to convince him to come out now.
Now, were you feeling upset at that point, or you're still like optimistic, like I'm eager and I'm gonna go and invite him?
Well, let's say that youth probably gave me more optimism, but there was pretty strong. I don't know if anger, frustration. Let's be nice and call it frustration. It just wasn't right. It just wasn't right. Okay, so he's in his office. So that's the good news and maybe not so good news. So I go in the office and I'm telling him about how not only is the team doing great and making great strides, but we just had all these visits from the hourly crew and the maintenance folks, and how it brightened the team up every time they were just so proud of it and they were showing it off. And I said, but what surprised me was what we're doing is we're not getting visits from management and leadership, and it would be great to get you to come out. And he looks at me and he says, what are you really trying to tell me? And there's a moment where you go, okay, maybe it's time to back down, but that's not in my nature. So, in the nicest way I could think of, I said something like, Carl, it would be fantastic if you would come out and see what we're doing and show the team your commitment to their effort. And that's when everything changed.
So something like that. So that sounds like a positive statement, but I think
Yeah.
I'll let you continue. I think I probably know what may have triggered him here.
So he was triggered, all right. And he said, Adam, if you're questioning my commitment, you can do it from corporate, all in capital letters, right? So I'll have to tell you that I'm not exactly certain what I said next or what happened next. What I can say is I wasn't fired. I did walk out with my tail between my legs. I tried to brighten up before I joined the team so that why should they bear the brunt of that? And we continued working. Now, of course, I was bitter, pretty dejected. Again, I'm a pretty energetic guy, but I'm sure it was fairly obvious that I'd been beaten down pretty good. And I tried not to complain to them. One of the fellas on the team was a supervisor, and I might have said to him, and he probably gave me the look like, oh, that was a really bad idea. How are you still here? Kind of thing. But the week wore on, and by Friday, so we did this for the full week. There was no, I used to, I didn't really have a plan per se. I mean, we prioritized and we were doing the things that they wanted to do, and it was making a difference. But I always wanted at the end of the week to kind of let them show off what they did. Okay, how was I going to do that? Well, I will tell you that I don't remember what the conversation was, but Friday afternoon, we actually had an audience, and Carl was there. The plant manager was there, and a few others were there. And the team was able to, show off their work, and they got some pretty nice recognition, thank yous and clapping and all that kind of stuff. And, I got invited back many times afterwards, but I will say that Carl, at least that week, never acknowledged that anything I said had any influence on it. In some ways, I'd like to think it had some influence on it, but I realize, as my favorite mistake, that's not the way to influence management leadership to support their teams. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah. So I guess the mistake in a nutshell is it the choice of words? I mean, to show your commitment, I mean, that could have been interpreted many different ways. In a way, you're acknowledging his commitment, and you can come but maybe, well, is it like, I mean, this is getting, no, let's get into the weeds for a minute. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
if you had said something to the effect of, a way of coming out and continuing to show your, I don't know, like is there a way of saying that? Because you were trying to be positive about it, I'm guessing, right? Like, come out and recognize people and demonstrate your commitment. But so I mean, like, I'm not trying to, well, you said it was a mistake, and yeah.
It was a mistake. So clearly, how I said it could have been better. So I don't know about you, but I experience, foot and mouth disease from time to time. But really, what it led me to, in the broader sense, is to create the process and the system to create that leadership commitment before the team is even developed. And that's really what it taught me. Now, I'll be honest with you. I was bitter about that for more than a day, right? And I didn't develop my approach to leadership commitment immediately either. But that is the basis of the new book, is how to, and what is the image of that, and how do you actually engage in such a way so that you you have the commitment before you even take that first step.
Yeah, and that seems like maybe the higher level lesson. So there's questions of the words you used or the tone, or again, like, this could have been, you caught Carl on a bad day. This might not have been, your mistake, but I think the higher level point that you make is something I had jotted down about, that upfront commitment.
Right.
So just recap a little bit. Our guest again is Adam Lawrence. The book that he mentioned, his new book, The Wheel of Sustainability, is the title there. And as you called it, my favorite oopsie. I don't think we're going to rename the podcast.
Well, that was my mistake today,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no. It's just that's a fun way of putting it. But kind of stepping back and thinking a little bit to what you were saying up front. If you were invited, kind of, like, with a question mark, it's famous expression, I guess. I'm here from corporate, and I'm here to help.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Is there agreement around that? I mean, I was never in a role where I was sent really from site to site, but being within a site,
Hmm.
I was often sent,
Right.
like, I'm sent from this improvement group, I'm here to help. And there's always that question of, like, how broad is the invitation? Somebody invited you in,
Yeah.
but does
Right.
everybody feel like you were invited? How do you set that up front is an important thing to think about.
Yeah, and it's a great point. And I never really followed up. So over the years, Carl and I developed a pretty good working relationship. I never really went back to say, okay, we joked about it a little bit. I said, remember the time you about fired me, so we could do that because once you prove your value, people can sometimes overlook that you didn't use the right words. Okay. And really positionally, he was a couple levels above me. So, there it might have been a piece of that. Um, but I think the piece of all of this, again, there's got to be a level of credibility. And then you have to, in my mind, what I learned again is create that image of what does that look like so that we can be aligned around that first. And then I know where you are and you know where I am. And we both are agreed on what we're trying to accomplish. I do believe because I had moved from a different subsidiary, a different industry, to that industry. I didn't have credibility in that industry at that point. I was a guy that just loved to be on the factory floor working with the people and saw things in a different way um, that led to improvements. So once we got the first one under my belt, I think the second, third, and fourth one were a lot easier to do. Hey, we've got this other line and we've got this other group and we like what you did. And, but first time you just think everybody knows you're going to be okay. Not necessarily.
Sure. No, I mean, and that speaks to the power of relationships.
Right.
And coming in as an outside consultant, as you do now, and as I do,
Yeah.
there's a lot of relationship building
Yes.
that can and should be done up front, so that we don't run the risk of miscommunications or misinterpretations or lack of trust that come just from not having established those relationships. How can we have those relationships in place for that first cycle instead of maybe stumbling through something, and in your case being fortunate to have a second, third,
Right.
continued cycle to build that relationship. What are your thoughts on that relationship building, especially if you're being brought in for something that's relatively short term, or there's pressure? How do we find that balance between getting the work done and building the relationships that help us get the work done?
So it's a great question. So what I do now in my process is I try to have a stepwise approach to engaging with that client for the first time. So the first discussion is a call. We're getting to know one another, and I'm trying to understand the issues that they're dealing with. If that creates some form of alignment, I try to be myself regardless of what activity we're in, because I feel like they should know what they're getting early so that no one's going to be disappointed, right? The second step is typically what I call the site visit or site assessment. It's usually about a day. And what I do is I'm walking Gemba with leadership. And we're talking about it from their eyes and from my eyes. What do you really care about? And let's see what your people think about that. Within that visit, I actually take 30 minutes to 45 minutes to talk about this wheel of sustainability, this image again of what teams are going to be utilizing to sustain their results and how leaders participate in that. Now, if they engage in that discussion, we've got a good chance to move forward. If it's kind of just like another thing and not interesting to them, and yeah, I know all this, it's not likely to move forward. And it might be, believe it or not, sometimes because of me, because what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do is set up the team to have a winning experience, right? We want, you don't get that many opportunities unless you're in a company that does this with great frequency. But a lot of times I'm meeting with groups, potential clients that have never done this or have very low experience. So to create that image looks like, and even an image of what a Kaizen can actually accomplish, they're almost taking a leap of faith. I've had people say, there's no way that can get done in 3 days. We'll tell that to 300 other teams that have done it, that in my experience. I mean, but if they've never seen it, and if I can't portray the image of it in a way that they feel comfortable with, then that's on me. But at least I can give them that image so that they can see. So those 8 spokes in that one hub, they sit through a little discussion of it. And hopefully, if they're asking questions, I go, okay, there's a shot at this. We've got to have a good chance at alignment, and we can do right by the team.
Yeah. Well, it's great, and I appreciate you sharing, your story and your reflections and your lessons learned. I think there's a lot of food for thought for others who do similar work. And we're going to talk a little bit before we wrap up about the book, The Wheel of Sustainability. I do want to mention to listeners and viewers, I did a longer interview with Adam in April 2020, where we talk in much more detail about this wheel of sustainability concept. You can find more about that by going to leanblog.org/362, or you can search Leanblog interviews, Adam Lawrence. If you search in Apple Podcasts or your podcast player app of choice, you can find that discussion if you want to learn more about that. So the book is a new development between when we released that discussion in April and now. So what's your elevator pitch summary of the book? Who is it for? What will people get out of the book? What type of reader should definitely go and pick this up?
Right. Well, great question, Mark. So the book is written for those folks that want to engage and empower their people to sustain the results or the solutions to the problems they're trying to solve. So if you think about it, a lot of effort is done solving complex business problems. But if we aren't thinking about what's going to make those results live on, we're going to go up against those same problems over and over again. That's frustrating. Business is investing, people are investing their time. So the wheel of sustainability is my image of the system that helps give that team the best chance to sustain those results. So it's not just a manufacturing book. It's not just a business book. I actually, working with my wife a little bit, came up with some home related uses of it. You say, let's just test this out. This is our experiment. So, I've been told to get out of the kitchen because that's my wife's toolbox. So things like that say this is applicable to how you sustain results that you try so hard to achieve. We put so much energy into it. It just seems like there isn't enough material on sustainability as there should be. So I thought this is an area that's a passion of mine. Um, so I think if you're interested, if the listeners are interested in another way to think about sustaining results, this is that. There's not a lot new here, except maybe the image and the structure, and just maybe some of my thoughts on some of the terms.
So you've got that wheel, and it's got a hub, and it has spokes. And is the implication of that model? I don't know the dynamics of, let's say, a bicycle wheel.
Right.
How many spokes can be missing and still have a
Right.
functioning wheel?
Okay, so another great question. I found that I wrote this statement now 6 times, got down to 3. So I was told too redundant, too redundant. So it has 8 spokes. So you can remove a spoke and the wheel will still spin. It won't be as strong. If you leave the hub out, which is leadership commitment, the wheel falls apart completely. So leadership commitment applies to all of those spokes and then just the whole system as it is in total.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that makes good sense. So again, the Wheel of Sustainability, it's available, and you can learn more about Adam's work through Process Improvement Partners. Adam, first off, what's the website people can go and visit?
Okay, so it's pi-partners.com. I also have a LinkedIn page, and there's a company LinkedIn page at Process Improvement Partners. And there's a lot of contact information for me as well, because as Mark knows, and hopefully some of your listeners know, I could talk about this stuff all day. So if anybody has further questions, absolutely love to share it with them. And, hopefully there's some interesting, there's about 40 stories similar to the one I just shared in the book, trying to illustrate examples of each of of elements of the wheel, just because I thought it'd be more fun to kind of share, here's what we did right, here's what we didn't do so well.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the book, you can find more information about it there, and it's also available through Amazon.
right.
And that's available in what formats? Paperback and Kindle?
Yep, it's paperback and Kindle.
Okay. Well, I hope people will check that out again. So, Adam Lawrence, author of The Wheel of Sustainability, and the subtitle, I think, a good summary of what we're trying to accomplish: engaging and empowering teams to ensure their results live on. So, we don't want short term results that fade or disappear or backslide. That's what we're battling against, right?
Right. Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity. It was great speaking with you again.
Yeah, well, sure thing. Thanks for sharing your oopsie with us.
Okay. Happy to do it.
The first oopsie I think we've had in My Favorite Mistake. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.